You're welcome to
Hello.
Talk Cinema with your host, Julius Freeman, who is often on mute, and your other host, James, no capital letter, just James with all lowercase letters, and I'm Sean Malone. How you doing tonight, Julius?
I'm doing well. Thank you, James. Thank you, James. Thank you, Sean, for saving me there. Because I had no idea I was on mute. I was trying to do like a BBC kind of like, welcome to Talking Cinema with Julius Freeman. episode the prequels of the Star Wars saga. But no, I failed. I totally failed because I have my microphone on mute. But yes, I'm doing well. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first episode of Talking Cinema for 2021. Please welcome my co-hosts, the one who saved me, Sean, and James, a good friend of mine, James. Let's see, what's that? Come Pro, ID Crisis. Welcome, ID Crisis, to the show. Hopefully, you'll get to talk with us about the Star Wars prequels and if you loved them or hated them. For those who will tune in later, I hope you guys will join us and discuss whether or not you like the prequels of the Star Wars saga. So that's what tonight's episode is going to be. Tonight's episode is going to be about us talking about the prequels of the Star Wars universe that was directed and written by George Lucas. The first film was released in 1999, correct? Right? Am I correct?
Yes.
1999,
yeah,
May of 1999.
Mm-hmm.
And the second one, episode 2, came out in 2002, I want to say. 2002. And then the third one came out in 2005, if I'm correct.
Yeah.
2005. So, right off the bat, guys, let's overall talk about what you think of the prequels. Have they aged well? Have they lost its luster? Do you think that the new fans who have been watching the prequels, do they know what they're talking about, as opposed to the old Star Wars fans who hate the prequels, like I did for a long time, until when I rewatched it again recently, I kind of found myself liking them again, which is odd. I don't know what that is. I don't know why that happened, but overall, let's start with you, Sean. How do you feel about the prequels? What do you like? What is? Do you love them? Do you hate them? Are you in the middle? Go for it.
So much to say. I will say that I've wasted, well, let's say I've spent many hours, hundreds of hours of my life, maybe even dozens, if not hundreds of days, just talking about Star Wars and talking about the prequels in particular with close friends, with my brother. So it's talking about the Star Wars prequels is kind of a pastime for me. And I've probably passed more time doing that than anything else, honestly, in my life. So I will say, in short, I know we're going to cover a lot of this tonight, but in short, when Star Wars got sold to Disney, I was excited. I was like, yeah, get it out of George's hands. Give it to someone new. Then they made the movies and did everything they did with Star Wars, and I started to miss George, and I started to wonder what stories George would have told and how George would have done it, because at the end of the day, George Lucas created Star Wars, and you ever seen that movie, People versus George Lucas, guys?
No,
I've never seen it.
It's a documentary, and it's basically a bunch of wimpy fans complaining about George Lucas for 2 hours in a documentary about how he ruined their childhood, or how he ruined Star Wars. And I think that movie was a marking point for me, along many marking points that just started making me think, you know what? No, we can't bag on this guy. He gave us the greatest gift, like, of a generation. He gave the entire world a mythology. He's my hero. I can't bag on him anymore. And so when I look back at the prequels now, I just appreciate them more. And they're not perfect, and we'll talk about how they're not perfect tonight. But I appreciate them more as expressions of George Lucas's imagination, his values, the themes and ideas that he was trying to get across in all the Star Wars films. And that's why I miss George. So, yeah, I think that's a lot to go on.
Very well said. Very well put. James, what's your overall thoughts on the prequels? What was your first? Did you like them? Did you enjoy them? Did you hate them? Did you come to love them? What is it? Tell me. Talk to me, brother.
With all things Star Wars, at the moment of their release, I drank all the Kool-Aid. I watched them as many times as I could. I was in high school as they were releasing, and at least with Phantom Menace and with Attack of the Clones, and I was just so pumped that like these were the Star Wars movies of my generation, and I think by the time Revenge of the Sith came out, I was a pretentious 20-year-old, and I was like, oh, I don't need these movies anymore. Star Wars is lame. And I went and saw Revenge of the Sith, and I was like, I'm glad to be done with these movies. Like I'd listened to every takedown, read every takedown. And like Sean said, leading up to the release of Revenge of the Sith, I've again, like, I wouldn't say I wasted, hundreds, if not thousands of hours. Like I just enjoyed every moment of Star Wars discussion that I had with friends and family, just speculating about where these movies were going to go and what was going to be revealed. And as somebody who consumed a lot of the, expanded universe and the lead up, everything that happened before A New Hope was off limits. So I was seeing things with Phantom Menace and with Attack of the Clones that like had only been hinted at, Obi-Wan mentions the Clone Wars offhandedly in A New Hope. And then I remember seeing Attack of the Clones and just being like, this is it. This is, the Clone Wars. We're finally seeing it. But yeah, I think after Revenge of the Sith came out, I lost a lot of my appreciation for it because I felt like I could easily nitpick them. There's a lot of things that are really easy to criticize. And a weird thing happens. I think you get through your 20s and you start to like really appreciate a specific personal vision. And that's what the prequels have, even more so than any other Star Wars movies, including the original trilogy. They are one singular vision of a writer, producer, director, given, personally financing these films to make anything he wants to make. And it's really incredible in hindsight. So that's definitely where I stand now.
I wholeheartedly agree with you, James, and that's so well put. And I'll also say, as you get into your 20s and 30s, people who give a crap about stuff and like try hard and make stuff, you start to respect those people a lot more, as opposed to just, I could have done it better.
Yeah.
Hey, I was one of those guys.
Just the fact that he continued to double down on his vision, you'd think when the Phantom Menace came out and there was, uproar among older fans that didn't like the film, that, I don't know, maybe he would bring in another writer and another, like maybe, hand it off to another director or something. But he was like, no, these are the movies I'm making. This was my vision. This is what I always wanted to make. Love it or hate it. This is my Star Wars. And I really respect that.
Yeah, I agree. I can agree with that, because that's still kind of the same thing that's happening with the Zack Snyder cut, right? People were wanting. I'm not comparing George Lucas to Zack Snyder, okay? So don't get it twisted, guys. All right. I'm just talking about the principle of the artist, the vision of the artist, right? So of course the Snyder cut is all about like, well, Zack Snyder didn't really get to do his vision, but then you bring up a good point about George Lucas being like buckling down, saying, no, this is what I want. It's mine. I could do what I want with it, and this is what I'm going to do with it. And fandom be damned. And he did it. He did it without ever buckling down. But I think the main problem for me anyway, personally, was the fact that he had too many yes people around him, I think, around that time with the prequels. He needed someone to tell him, look, George, maybe this isn't working out as well. Maybe we need to rewrite this scene, or maybe we need to work on this scene a little further. And I feel like when I rewatched the movies recently, I felt like I was watching the first draft of a script on screen. That's what I felt like when I was watching the film, because the film just, like, the action is fantastic. I'm not going to take that away from George Lucas. He was a fantastic action director. Like he just you could tell he's a lover of action films. So not just action, swashbuckling. He's a student of swashbuckling films. And so he was able to recapture that in today's audience and bring that to today's audience. But I feel like overall, he needed a second writer, or he needed someone to just say, you know what, George, we need to work on this a little bit more because it's not coming off well on screen. So that's how I felt about it. Overall, well, I mean, I was like, I think I was 19 years old when I watched episode 1. I watched it 12 times in the theater. When I watched it again, I did. Yeah, I was a huge nerd. I was a huge Star Wars nerd, and I was so excited. I was so giddy for episode 1 because, like you said, this is my Star Wars. I'm going to have my own Star Wars. This is going to be fantastic. So the first time when it was released, the first day it was released on a Thursday. I actually skipped school. I actually did not go to school that day. I actually, bye mom, bye dad, I'm going to school, and I actually got on the bus and I went to the theater to watch episode 1, and I didn't go to school that day. And I watched it once. I waited I kind of like waited around, and I snuck in to watch the second time again that same day, and then I went home. And my parents none the wiser.
I respect you so much more. And I already respected you a lot, but just knowing that about you, I respect you.
You had to, man. I mean, it was a fire. There was a fire, a strong fire within me to want to watch and experience what my parents' generation experienced when Star Wars first came out in the 70s, late 70s, and then, of course, during the 80s. So I wanted that experience, and I got it. I loved it. That lightsaber duel between the two Jedi, Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon Jinn? Qui-Gon, thank you. Qui-Gon Jinn and Darth Maul was like, with the John Williams score behind it, it was just absolutely phenomenal. Like, I'm going to show a clip of it. I have it up here. And yes, I protected myself, so hopefully we won't get struck down. But, I mean, this whole thing was just absolutely phenomenal.
That shot.
It's incredible. It's incredible.
Yeah.
It's a great shot.
All right. Woo! It doesn't get you hyped for that, then I don't know what to do.
I just remembered when I initially saw the trailer and watched it a million times on like low bandwidth, whatever internet I had, AOL at the time, like just downloaded it and watched it at home as often as I could. I just wanted to inject whatever clips they had of that fight into my veins, like it just piecing together what that could possibly be, because it was just like the realization of every fantasy I'd ever had about a lightsaber duel. And like the lightsaber duels in the original trilogy are great, but they're also limited by the technology of the time. And seeing these like wide open spaces, these incredible sets and this amazing choreography, it's an iconic battle for sure.
Well, they also took, I think they take different approaches with the battles, lightsaber battles in each movie.
Yeah.
And, also I think since Return of the Jedi to that movie, episode 1, there's a lot of years of cinema there where movies got a lot more frenetic,
Oh yeah. But his approach remains. That's one thing that I really noted watching the prequels this time, and I've noticed, more and more, is that as these movies have aged, they feel more and more like Star Wars movies. They feel more and more like they aesthetically, stylistically match the films that came before, especially The Phantom Menace, which, relies on a lot of practicals, a lot of, miniatures, and is shot on celluloid, as opposed to episode 2 and 3. It really feels like it's, the fourth film in that Star Wars franchise.
Yeah, the aesthetics, that's an interesting conversation to have, because you rightly pointed out episode 1 shot on film. It still has practical effects and miniatures and things like that. With, episode 3, I've always felt like episode 3 is the most aesthetically related to the subsequent movies, or the original trilogy. And of course that's by design. Like, the production design is meant to bridge the aesthetic gap, I think, between the prequels and the original trilogy, with the spaceship designs and the color palettes and everything. But I find the third one, so, it's no secret for you guys, but for our audience, the third movie is just my favorite of the series. It's
let's hold off. Let's hold off on that one. Let's go chronological order if we can, then we'll talk about episode 3 later on the show. I know. I'm sorry, Sean. But we gotta keep it here.
Where's that? Where's the meme of the little kid going?
ID Crisis says Mr. Plinkett's review on the prequels was very eye-opening for me. I don't think I've ever read that.
I mentioned this to you, Julio, recently. The Red Letter Media.
Okay. Yeah. Gotcha. And he also did say, I'm sorry, go ahead, James. Go ahead.
I was going to say that it's weird because those videos had a huge impact on me, because I think they're hilarious. They're great, but they actually made me appreciate the movies more, even though they're these epic takedowns. I was like, I don't know what it is. When I start to really love a film, or a film becomes, just I don't know, part of my life. Even an epic takedown will make me go, I don't know, but I kind of like those aspects. I don't know. I kind of love it, flaws and all,
ID Crisis also said that's also the problem Star Wars and Empire have producers to deal with. The prequels didn't even get a second story draft, and it shows. That's what I said earlier about the watching the first draft of the film. You're right. That's the one gripe I have with the fandom Menace types. The Star Wars fans who just shit on all, anything that they don't like, they just crap on it. And the one thing that I feel like a lot of moviegoers are missing these days is just have fun. Just have fun. Just enjoy it. And yeah, don't get me wrong. This was bad. Jar Jar Binks was terrible. When I watched it again, I was like, gosh, I want to slap this character. I want to slap him and get him away from the screen. And I understood what George Lucas was trying to do. He was trying to create a new 3CPO. He was trying to create some kind of new, bubbling comedic relief in the film, and it just fell flat. It fell flat for me. I don't know. Did it fall flat for either of you?
Well, I think Sean. Do you know that the inspiration for Jar Jar was silent movie stars like Buster Keaton? Not that it was successful, but that's kind of what he was going for. Which, I mean,
and it fell flat.
Intention wise, I appreciate it. Execution wise, it's a confounding choice. I don't it's not successful. I completely agree, but it doesn't bug me as much as it did when I was younger. It's just it is what it is. Jar Jar kind of sucks, but I don't know. I'm glad he exists.
He's a cartoon character.
Definitely.
Before that point, Star Wars didn't have cartoon characters, and it had puppets, but convincing, well crafted, well operated puppets. But yeah, Jar Jar was something different entirely. Even when I was younger, and I did go to see the movie 13 times in the theater, kind of like Julio did. But even then, like, that was one aspect of the movie I just couldn't be like, I love this. You know, there's other aspects I argued myself into like liking that later I reflected and like, I don't know, maybe that's not so good. And like, that should be said too. And I think I implied that, but like, it's not like my relationship with these movies is complicated. Like, that would be my relationship status with the Star Wars prequels. But yeah. See, it's hard. I know we don't have 52 hours to have this conversation. So,
well, you know what? My take on Phantom Menace, if we're just focusing specifically on that movie at the moment, I really think it's such an ambitious film, like in terms of its storytelling and its structure and the balancing act of all of the different threads that are happening in the film. And it is crippled by two poor choices, one of them being Jar Jar. And I think the other, to say Anakin is, it doesn't really, I think, quite, it's not as specific as it should be. I think that like Jake Lloyd's performance is unfortunate. The direction is unfortunate. The dialogue is unfortunate. But I think the decision to make Anakin 9 years old and then recast him in a later film was a bad idea. Like, I appreciate the films and I don't want them to be remade or anything, but if I could go back in time and like tap Lucas on the shoulder, I would tell him like, age him up a little bit, make him 15 or whatever. It will make the love story a little less creepy. And then I think you also would have more of the character would resonate more if it's the same actor across 3 films. Imagine if Mark Hamill played Luke in A New Hope and then they recast him and made him a little bit older in the next film. You'd be like, who is this? You know?
Right. I heartedly agree with you too, because that was another struggle of bringing Hayden Christensen into that role and asking the audience to accept him as Anakin when we had already just been asked to accept this kid, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right, James. I think, and that would have made the Padme Anakin relationship it would have made it make more sense, first of all.
Yeah.
And I actually have a friend who pointed out, he thinks that then they could have done, if they had done that, then they could have done something like a triangle of interest between Obi-Wan and Padme and Anakin. And that makes a lot of sense to me too. Yeah. I will say, really in a nutshell about episode 1, I think it's an uneven movie. There's parts of it I love and really enjoy, and I feel completely Star Warsed, you know, when I'm watching it. Mm-hmm. And then, but it's just like, it's peaks and valleys the whole way through the movie where I'm like, I love this. No, I don't like this. I love this. I don't like this. And some of the I don't like this stuff is like the really silly stuff. The Gungans and the way they talk, and just some of those
Gungans,
more odd.
Oh my God.
and I don't mean to bag on Jake Lloyd, because I know fans were like really cruel to him. But like,
what's up with that? That wasn't the kid's fault.
Yeah, but like, you know,
there's awful.
You're talking about dialogue and direction too, James, but like, you know, lines like, now this is pod racing, you know, like, those are the moments where I'm like, okay, you brought me off of my high, you know.
But it's like the Harrison Ford quote, like, you know, George, you can write this shit. It's another thing to try to say it, you know. Like, I that's the thing. Like, if you're a 9-year-old trying to navigate through, you know, George Lucas dialogue, I mean, I'm sorry, like, kid, like, this is gonna ruin your life, like, and you have no idea at this moment, you know.
Even Academy Award-winning actress Natalie Portman couldn't figure.
Yeah, exactly.
This 9-year-old kid gonna do it.
Yeah.
ID Crisis says, I agree on kid. David Linklater could do it with Boyhood. Let the kid age up. Good point, ID Crisis. Very good point. I will say this before we segue to episode 2. I did, upon watching episode 1 again, that pod racing was absolutely fantastic. Like, when I watched it again, I was like, wow, this right here was like, it felt like Star Wars when I watched that entire pod racing. But you're right, you know, 15-year-old Anakin Skywalker, or even 13-year-old Skywalker, would have been a lot more better to have in that movie than a 9-year-old Skywalker, because it kind of felt a little bit too unbelievable to have a 9-year-old. Albeit they explain that he's just really sensitive to the Force and has the gift, right? But I think it would have been a lot more believable for me anyway. I don't know about for everyone else. If he was 12 or 13 years old, doing those amazing things in the pod race, at that age, that would have been fantastic.
Yeah. If I can say a couple of things about Phantom Menace before we move on to Attack of the Clones, because I think it's been the one over the years that I've really come around to, because it's the one that everyone bags on, and I think it's the one that actually has a lot of great qualities to it. And first and foremost, like you said, the pod race scene and the final duel are iconic. Like they're two of the best Star Wars sequences of any Star Wars. And I think also the music is incredible. John Williams was coming up with all of these brand new themes. And it's like wall to wall, 2 hours of brand new music, and it all feels like classic Star Wars, even though it doesn't really borrow from any of the original trilogy at all, which is an incredible feat, I think. And also, the final act of The Phantom Menace is an incredible balancing act of like all of these different story threads that are all coming together. And I appreciate it more when I watch it that, like, even if the film like loses some momentum here and there, like that third act really comes together. It ties the whole thing up in a bow, and it's really effective. And yeah, I don't know. I really appreciate Lucas's just innovative storytelling. It's incredible.
Yeah, flashes of genius for sure. That's what George Lucas has.
Definitely.
Flashes of genius, but it's not consistent. And
definitely not.
Yeah, and that it's a shame, because George Lucas could have been a great director. He could have been up there with the Spielbergs and the Coppolas and who's the other guy? Help me out here. De Palma. Those directors that made great films. And yeah, it's just, I don't know. Like I said, I think he just had too many yes men at this point in his career, afraid to tell him we should work on this a little bit more, George, because it's not really working out as we're seeing the dailies. Because I'm pretty sure they're watching dailies as they were shooting. And if I were there, I would have been like, maybe we should.
Yeah, but who's gonna tell the Emperor that he has no
right?
No,
right. So with that said, like you said, that was a perfectly well said, James. How everything came together in the end of Act 3, and so now we start with Episode 2, the Clone Wars. Wait, not the Clone Attack of the Clones. Excuse me.
Yeah.
And I have to say, the beginning of Episode 2 was great. This whole movie for me was a lot better than I remember it, when I first watched it in the theater, because of how quickly he starts it. And I was really surprised by it when I watched it again. How the ship lands, Queen Amidala comes out, and the ship just boom explodes, and immediately the story takes off. Who tried to assassinate Queen Amidala? What's going on here? What's happening? And of course, Obi-Wan goes to investigate, and at the same time, the maneuverings of Palpatine, making sure everything is put into place so that way it all works according to plan. And I loved how Lucas, once again, he flashes of genius, right? How he goes back and forth, how he seamlessly just goes back and forth with the two stories happening at the same time. Just absolutely great editing overall for Episode 2.
Yeah.
What are your overall thoughts of Episode 2? Let's start with James this time. Go for it, James.
So Attack of the Clones might be my least favorite Star Wars movie. Even though I do like all of the movies, it's the one that I have the hardest time with. And it's because every time, whereas like with The Phantom Menace, I think every scene has something I love and something I cringe at. Attack of the Clones has entire sequences where I just cringe, and it is the love story between Anakin and Padme. Yes. I really I've tried my whole life to find a way to I don't know, to try to spin it that it works. It just doesn't work. It's, I think, the one component of Star Wars at large that I'm just this is just terrible. It's really it needed a different writer. It needed a different perspective. And it disrupts the flow of the movie. Every time we cut back to them, and like you said, the opening is very strong. It's the minute that you get the two of them alone, frolicking in the grass, or by some weird, fireplace, just sitting together for some random weird reason. It's just, I don't understand what what he's trying to do. Yeah.
And Hayden Christensen's acting was atrocious in this film. Absolutely atrocious. And again, I don't think it was his fault, because a lot of actors are trained to kind of follow the director's lead. The director is the one who tells them, okay, this is what I'm looking for. Try to get this, try to do this, whatever. And I guess he was working with what George Lucas told him to work with. And it didn't come off well at all. And you could tell in this movie anyway, you could clearly see that George Lucas does not know how to work with actors. He's a great action director, but just he's like a kind of like out of tune with acting in general. And I think that hurt the movie a lot, because you're right. The romance scenes were very, very cringe. But I understood what he was trying to get at. The love affair was supposed to be, forbidden, and it was supposed to give off this idea that he's violating the Jedi rule, and it just felt flat. It felt flat because he didn't have. I think George Lucas just doesn't know how to do romance, and I think he needed to get someone in to help him out, to either co-direct or someone who could just look over his shoulder and be like, hey, maybe we should work on this a little bit more, or rewrite this scene a little bit more. Because it was shot beautifully. I have to admit, those scenes between Anakin and Amidala were actually well shot. I like the way it looked. Yeah. It's just, but like you said, it was cringe. So, Sean, what do you have to say about episode 2 or overall?
It's funny. It's my least favorite of this prequel trilogy. Might be my least favorite Star Wars film, although Rise of Skywalker has given it a run for its money. I still went to see it 11 times in the theater because I love Star Wars. I was obsessed with Star Wars, and I almost felt like it was my duty as a Star Wars fan to do that. I don't know. I don't have much to say about this. Well, can I say some things I like about it?
Sure, go for it.
Yeah.
I always enjoyed the sort of idea of the chase sequence in Coruscant. The car, the flying car.
Yeah, that was well done. Yeah, that was well done. Keep going. Sorry. Go on.
Yeah, I like it for its it's exciting, but it also has some stuff there between Obi-Wan and Anakin. It's character development, and you get to see into their relationship, and things that will be important both later in the movie and in episode 3. I liked I'm just thinking back to when I was younger and I watched it in the theater 9 times or 11 times. I like the Coliseum, when they fought the monsters, I thought that was cool.
That was cool.
But and what I love about this movie now, I was trying to remember all the things I liked. What I love about this movie is Jango Fett. I actually really like when we follow. I really like Ewan McGregor, and I like him as Obi-Wan Kenobi. So when we follow him throughout the story, and when he goes to the clone facility and everything, I always enjoyed that part. But especially him facing off with Jango Fett, and then that idea that you get to see a Jedi fight a Boba Fett type character, or
that was really cool.
And then I don't know if you guys have recently watched the Mandalorian series. Slave One has made an appearance, and they brought back something about Slave One that originated in episode 2, which
that's right,
thoroughly enjoyed, which was those acoustic bombs that go off,
the seismic charge, right?
Yeah, and they make that sound wah, that whole sequence. And actually, I think that's the most artful sequence of episode 2 as well, because George Lucas chose to use no music during that sequence of, and it's been a while, guys, but Obi-Wan and Jango and that pursuit that they have, and then the seismic charges that he distributes. and he decided
yeah.
to do that sequence with no music, and then it's and kind of like the silence of space. And then when those charges go off and you hear those sounds, especially when you were in the movie theater and it's in THX surround, it was just like, wow, this is it was the thing episode 2 got for me to that sort of Darth Maul moment of excitement, with the possible exception of the other really cool thing that happens in this movie. I'm thinking back to my young 20-year-old self or whatever. I was 20. I was 20 when this movie came out. And I'm thinking back to that. And I remember seeing that. And when Jango Fett gets his head chopped off, when Mace Windu chops Jango Fett's head off, I remember just being like, whoa! like my brother still talks about that moment when I just couldn't believe that they went there, that they chopped a guy's head off in a Star Wars movie. It was awesome.
Yeah, that's what Star Wars is supposed to be about for me, and that's why I was really upset when Disney bought them, because I knew they were going to cut down on that, and that was my main disappointment. But speaking of which, here's the scene I want to show you guys from episode 2, which I think is one of the best scenes in the movie.
Yeah,
because it was dope to see a Jedi against a Mandalorian. Especially in the rain too, which was also even like a nice, cream on the top, like a cherry on top. I mean,
It's so cool.
That's some Jedi rope throwing right there.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That'll teach him. That's what Biff Tannen would say.
So there you have it. That's a little clip of the one of the best scenes in the film, in my opinion.
Definitely.
That whole fight scene was fantastic and well shot and well choreographed. And once again, a flash of George Lucas's genius and his great eye for action. He just had a great eye for action, and I think he's underrated in that aspect.
That planet too.
AMRA versus Jedi feet, ID Crisis says.
Best car. I really love that planet design. And like when I was watching the film, I was zoning out during like most of the Padme Anakin stuff, just kind of like trying to detach myself from it so I wouldn't cringe too hard. But then the minute Obi-Wan came back, I was just like, yes. I mean, tell me more about this, Camino Dart and these clones and Master Sifo Dyas. What's going on here? Great stuff. And and I love that rain planet with those very big thin aliens. They're real creepy and cool looking, and culminating in that fight. It's fantastic. It's definitely like it makes the movie easier to watch when you can escape from that awful love story and move on to something that's just like so much more fun to watch, so glad they're they cross cut between the two.
Here you go, Sean. Just for you.
Oh yeah,
Ah, yes.
take it home, Samuel L. Yeah.
Boom. There it goes.
And
Hi,
then
Jenga. Or Django.
little Boba is about to.
No! That's what was missing in that part. No, father!
Oh, don't worry. In the special edition, they'll add a no. George Lucas will add.
We'll just add one after every scene, every character. Yeah. No, I have a funny story about Jango Fett really quickly and the decapitation, because when the film was coming out, and this was kind of a big thing at the release of each of these movies, I was so excited about each release that I would save up my allowance, and I would just buy as many of the toys and books and anything I could get my hands on. And so obviously when the trailers were coming out and I heard about this, Jango Fett character who's wearing this more blue-gray version of the Boba Fett armor, I had to own that. And that was like the first thing I bought. And I remember opening it and I'm like, kind of like playing with the action figure. And then the head just came off. And I was like, what's going on here? And it was because the head was magnetized. It could come off. And I was like, what is this? Why would they do this? Like, why would they just put the head underneath? And then I saw the movie and I was like, oh, that's okay.
That's awesome. That's pretty cool.
Pretty awesome on Kenner's part or Hasbro's part.
Yeah,
that is awesome. Wow, that's pretty. Wow, that's now that I think about it further, that's a little wow.
With realistic decapitation.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So remind me again what happens in. Oh, that's right. The Yoda. We finally get to see Yoda in all his glory in this film, which was another great scene. That was I think everyone loved. I don't think I ever heard anyone complain about that particular scene, that when they saw Yoda go one-on-one with Count Dooku, which by the way is a terrible name. Like when I watched it again, I was like, why did they pick Dooku? Like, why Dooku? It sounds like doo-doo. Like,
yeah, sure does.
I don't understand why George Lucas went with the name Dooku.
Because he thinks everyone on the dark side is full of doo-doo. So he just, I don't know.
Yeah, but see, you have Vader, right? Darth Vader, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Darth Sidious, that's awesome. But Dooku?
Well, that's why he turned
Maul?
to the dark side. That's why he turned to the dark side. He was like, he couldn't handle this Dooku name, so he changed it to Tyrannus, which is so much cooler. Tyrannus.
They should have stuck with that and not stayed.
Yeah.
Not ever bring up Dooku. They should never brought up that name. Terrible name. Jeez. But yeah, it was overall. I think episode 2 was still entertaining. It continued on the story forward. You got to see a little bit more about what the Clone Wars were all about, and Obi-Wan now has an idea. Not an idea, but now he's suspecting what's going on here. Why are all these clones, being produced? What's happening?
Yeah.
And I like that aspect. I like that there's the big story, the overall story, which is him investigating the attempted assassination of the Queen or the senator in this movie anyway. And then you start seeing the little conspiratorial things that he's starting to find, and of course that all accumulates in episode 3, which is a good segue to start with episode 3. But before we do, any last thoughts or any last thoughts about episode 2? Any that you guys want to share before we move on to episode 3?
I've got one comment that I want to make about that final duel. I love Obi-Wan, but my dude gets nicked in the arm and the leg, and he just goes to sleep. He's just like, yeah, sorry, I'm not fighting anymore. I'm done. Here, Anakin, take my lightsaber. I'm gonna go to sleep while Yoda fights now. Like,
dude,
I've
you're right.
never been able to understand what was going on in that scene. Like, I get it. Anakin loses part of his arm. Okay, that makes sense. He's out of commission. But Obi-Wan's just like, oh, I can't move. I can't do anything. And then Yoda just comes in and kicks some ass for the both of them.
Yes.
Shameful.
Yeah, that
Obi-Wan.
was definitely the saving grace of the film for
Yeah.
me when I watched it in the theater, because in the theater I was fuming in the theater. I was like, what am I watching? This is crap. This is absolute crap. Why? What's going on? I looked. My friend Jose was with me, and I looked over him and like, dude, what's happening? I don't understand what's going on here. Like, why is this sucking? This shouldn't be sucking. This should be great.
Yeah,
It should be fantastic. Why is this sucking? I don't understand. So at that point, by the end, I was ready to just quit, and then that saved it. But then, of course, after that, I still had a bad taste in my mouth, and I refused to watch episode 3 after I watched episode 2, and I did not watch it up until a few weekends ago. So I stuck by my guns. But then when we discussed about covering Star Wars, I was like, you know what? This is the time. This is the time to do it. And I'm not sorry that I watched it. I will admit that I was very impressed with episode 3. And I think that George Lucas at this point found his stride. There are still some moments in episode 3, but we'll talk about some more. But before we do, Sean, any last thoughts on episode 2 before we move on to episode 3?
None constructive.
Well, share them if they're not constructive.
Oh, that one scene where he goes into like the 50s diner and that guy's like, Obi-Wan.
Dexter.
Boom, boom, boom.
Love that guy.
That part, that was the jump the shark moment for me of that movie. But
can you imagine how much work you could get done with 4 arms? I mean, come on. I think you're jealous. Dexter is awesome. Like,
and another thing I'll say is like watching this movie is like watching the original special effects in the 1997 special edition A New Hope. Like the visual effects are really like they're just not quite there yet with all the CGI, and it's like even in that scene we just watched with the I don't know, Triceratops type creature,
Right?
Like you can't feel like the weight of that animal feels wrong, the heft of it, the movement of it. Like there's a lot of stuff like that in CGI, like the uncanny valley stuff where you're like, and it's like, yeah, CGI is fine, but if you're gonna do it, it should just look good, And episode 2 was made at, I think, that maybe turning point moment where it was like it wasn't quite there yet,
Yeah, for sure.
It's also worth noting too, especially before moving on to episode 3, that episode 2 was the first film, I believe, at least the first mainstream movie to be shot entirely digitally. Yeah, and so Lucas was balancing the most innovative technology cinema had, I think, seen at that point, as far as, switching from celluloid to digital. But also, I mean, he's also innovating and using these CGI characters and this CGI that, like, I mean, no film up until that point had ever even attempted to undertake that. And so while I watch episode 2 and I'm like, this is a mixed bag of a movie, I'm still like, I mean, I just admire this level of ambition and brilliance to just be like, you know what, I could do this the old fashioned way. I could do it easily. I could just hire a bunch of people, shoot on film, do it the old fashioned way. But no, I'm going to change the entire game. And I mean, it was that turning point that like completely revolutionized film in the 21st century. Like every movie shot digitally, and he pushed that forward. I don't know where we'd be at right now if it hadn't been for Attack of the Clones. So, yeah, I mean, got to give him praise for that.
Yeah, that's a very valid point. You're right. And as you know, the people who always go first are the ones that have to go through that threshold, and they have to go through the pain and aches of people complain about the amount of CGI that was in episode 2. But again, that led to Avatar. And now Avatar is considered to be a masterpiece amongst CGI usage in the film. But see, James Cameron was, I guess he was, he had enough perception, I guess, to wait until the technology caught up to what he had in here. And I think if George Lucas had done the same, he probably would have been more successful in doing what he really wanted to do. But you know, it was. I guess it was his time. I guess what I'm trying to say, it was his time to actually push it forward, so that way maybe later on it would be a lot better, and it was.
There are two things about that. One is that Cameron was able to do that, and because Lucas paved the way.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think Cameron would be the first to admit, like he idolizes George Lucas or really looks up to him or respects him. For a lot of those same reasons. In a way, they're cut from the same cloth. The other thing about, what was my other thought? Guys, read my mind. I can't remember what my other thought was. But,
well, I'll just say this: James Cameron was a better director than Lucas.
Yeah, but you know what? But at the same time, Attack of the Clones walked so that Avatar could run. So,
there you go. Ooh, well done, James. Well done.
I was just going to say, in regards to what you said, Julio, about Cameron waiting until the technology was there, like look, like watch Last Jedi or Rogue One, you know, and it's like, like it's all there. Like, I mean, in terms of like the ships and the creatures and stuff, like the CGI is definitely there for the most part, but it just wasn't there for episode 2.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest problems with digital effects is that, like, as they age, video game technology catches up with them. And so inevitably 10 years later, everything looks like a video game when you rewatch it. So there are definitely scenes in the prequels where I'm like, oh, this kind of looks like a PS2 cutscene. So, you know, but I don't know. At the time, it was like the most innovative thing we'd ever seen, you know? So
that's right. That's true. Okay. Go ahead.
But story, even if the CGI is bad or whatever, like we can tolerate it because story is the thing that's important.
Absolutely.
Which is why, as we segue into episode 3, and I'll tell you guys why it's my favorite. It's not because the CGI is all better, even though it is somewhat better. It's because the story is so good, in my opinion.
So here we go. Let's start with. I'll just say this right now. To everyone watching at home, who everyone's going to watch after the fact, this first scene was the scene that convinced me right off the bat this is going to be pretty good. I have to admit.
Yeah,
I was really it. You remember that scene in Ratatouille when that critic eats that piece of food and it takes him back to his childhood? He's just like he remembers why he loves food so much. This scene did that for me. I have to admit. This scene did that for me. Yeah, it like sucked me back in. I was like, this is why I love Star Wars.
Yeah.
This right here.
That's awesome, man. I'm really happy to hear that. And the sound design here, like that banging.
Drums of War. Yeah.
This right here, this pan was, I was like, okay, this could be right. We'll see. And then this right here was like, like, oh my god.
Yeah.
And this whole thing is a oneer, right? Like
this reveal.
A one shot.
Yeah.
This reveal right here.
Right here. I was like, wow, yes. I was like, yes.
I love that they start this movie out in full scale warfare.
Yeah.
You know, like when Obi-Wan mentions the Clone Wars in episode 4, and your imagination goes wild and you're like, what, you know, you think about what that could be. It's like, to me, it's something more
beyond that. Beyond that, they're actually fighting Star Wars in this opening. It's a real Star War.
Absolutely. And again, this is part of George Lucas's like genius is the way he shoots action. So yeah, there is that. It was just a little clip of it. But story and groundbreaking effects, The Last Starfighter. Yes, I don't know what that means, but I'll agree with it. But yeah, that scene right there was like, okay, this is gonna be great. This is gonna be a great ride into, like, you know, seeing Anakin turn into Darth Vader, and not only that, but also seeing a glimpse of the Clone Wars, which was fantastic. So that right there. So overall thoughts, guys. Sean, we'll go back to you. What's your overall thoughts on episode 3, since you're the most excited about talking about this one?
Well, that opening scene continues through a pretty exciting opening sequence of them in the starfighters, of them boarding the enemy ship to try to rescue.
Yeah, I don't know why I cut there. Let me see if I can find another clip of it. Go ahead. Go on, Sean. Go on.
Yeah, and then they're almost captured. Then the ship is damaged, then they brought to the bridge. Then they take over the bridge. Then the ship tears in half. Then they have to crash land on a planet. And it's probably like a 20-minute long sequence. That opening sequence.
It's a 3-minute sequence, but we'll play it.
Yeah. So this. Should I talk or?
Go ahead. All the words so you can talk.
I'm talking about you're right. This sequence is like 3 minutes in the starfighters, but I'm talking about that whole sequence up until when they crash land on the planet.
Oh, I see.
That to me, and then there's some great lightsaber stuff in there. That's when Anakin faces off with Dooku. It's just great. For 20 solid minutes, I'm like, this is a great Star Wars movie, And that's why when I saw this movie, I was so kind of like you said, Julio, I was so encouraged and heartened when I saw this in the theater, because I was like, yes, I just watched 20 minutes of a new Star Wars movie and I loved every minute of it. And then that really boded well for the rest of the movie. There's not a lot about this movie that I take exception to, I read sometimes to help me crystallize my thoughts, I'll kind of look at people's criticisms of the movie. Like James was saying, I'll look at videos, I'll look at articles. And I encountered one critic who said something like that George Lucas had succeeded with episode 3 because what he had set out to do and what he was supposed to accomplish with this is to create, quote, a ripping space opera, end quote. And that he succeeded in doing that. And that's exactly how I felt about the movie. I felt like the promise of the prequels, which was Darth Vader or Anakin Skywalker turning to the dark side, how that happened, it was handled really well in this movie. The seduction of the dark side, the seduction and the secret machinations of the Chancellor and him seducing Anakin, and putting all these things into motion and all these events into play. I'm getting goosebumps as I talk about it because in this movie too, his struggle, right? His internal struggle of basically good and evil, which is at the heart of what Star Wars is all about. That's my favorite thing about Star Wars. The more, spiritual element of Star Wars, the more, mythological, moral aspect of Star Wars, which is are you going to be on the light side or are you going to be on the dark side, and that we all have that choice within us. So this movie totally it delivers on that. It delivers on the relationship between Anakin and Obi-Wan. It gives us one of the coolest fights of all time, on what's the name of the planet, James? The lava planet? Mustafar.
Yeah.
And I remember, and I'll say a couple more things, I'll pass to James. I remember before this movie came out, I was so proud of myself because I figured it out. I was like, dude, I know what's going to happen. Obi-Wan and Vader are going to have this epic fight, and Obi-Wan's going to mess him up and turn him into Darth Vader. And I totally called that. And I know, looking back, it's well, it's so obvious, Yeah. I'm so satisfied that, that actually happened. And Hayden Christensen's performance in this movie, I feel like
was a little better. Is
a good improvement from the previous film. Obviously, he has more to do, and there's more going on with his character, I think. And Ewan McGregor's performance, I love in this movie. I actually pulled up a clip for us to watch.
Cool.
And I also think that this movie is Ian McDiarmid's movie. He chews up the scenery as Palpatine in this movie.
Yes, agreed.
And he goes I mean, he goes for it. He goes full, you know, you never go full emperor. He goes full emperor in this movie. So yeah, I think it's Ian McDiarmid's movie, but I really think too, like the trilogy is, in terms of acting performances, Ewan McGregor and probably McDiarmid, I think are the two strongest turns in the trilogy. So I obviously love this movie. I did pull up a clip. Can I show you guys?
Sure, go for it. Make sure to share it, and I'll see it on my end, and I can play it.
Oh,
I like I said, this was my favorite, but I still have my problems with it. Obviously, I would say the acting was still kind of, it's like, it still needed some work, but gosh, yeah, like I did like. You're right. You're absolutely right. Ewan McGregor really stole the movie here with his acting. Are you ready to share, Sean?
Yeah.
Okay. Here we go.
Let me know.
Go for it, Tom. Nice.
Best line.
So uncivilized.
Oh, it looks like we had some technical difficulties. ID Crisis says stream went unavailable for like 3 minutes. Can I say all that again?
Oh, darn it.
Just went dark again. Oh, I hope nothing was wrong on my end. So ID Crisis, if you want to repeat what you said, by all means, everything's fine on my end. What about you guys? You guys still see me and hear me?
I've had no glitches.
I'm testing it right now. I'm going to your YouTube channel to see what's going on.
Yeah, make sure to mute it so that way.
Oh, dude.
What happened?
I broke it.
Broke it? What do you mean?
Stream suspended for policy violations.
Ah, are you kidding me?
Disney?
Are you serious? Freaking man. No, hold on. Let me see. Let me see on my end to see if the bastards. Okay. Well, I thought I did everything right. I put all the copyright stuff and made sure to give Disney the copyright and the fair use claim, but I guess that didn't work this time.
The mouse strikes back.
Bastards, man. Well, Sean, now you know why I hate Disney. Now you know why I hate him with a passion. Because of this stuff, like this. We're going live. We're having a good time talking. I was hoping showing clips would be, fun for people watching, but I guess not.
We're having a great time.
Oh, there it goes.
Are we live now?
Oh, damn! I hope you heard me, Disney. Screw you, Disney.
Yes.
I think we're back on. I see we're back on now.
Yeah, we're back. Yeah. Wow. Okay. So I just showed a clip from a certain film.
So that's probably why, because we probably been showing clips and they probably caught on.
Maybe it was too many clips. But anyway, Obi-Wan faces off with General Grievous, shoots him in the chest, and says, "So uncivilized," and it's my favorite part of the movie.
That was my gripe with this movie, is that. And the reason why is because I watched the Clone War cartoon, in between episode 2 and 3, the Samurai Jack style cartoon that was produced before episode 3 was released. I don't know if you guys seen that or not.
I've seen it. Yeah.
Now, that character, what's that character's name? Grievous?
Yeah.
General
Grievous was a freaking beast in that cartoon. Yeah. And so when the movie came out, I was hoping for that same character to show up in the live action film, and I didn't get to see that character. That badass, four-arm wielding Jedi killer. And so when Obi-Wan killed him, which was a good scene, I'm not gonna deny it. I'm not denying that scene was good. It was well paced. It was a good action. It was a good fight scene. But I was kind of hoping to see a lightsaber duel where Obi-Wan and Grievous have this crazy epic lightsaber duel, and it kind of felt like George Lucas cheated there, in my opinion, when I watched the film. But that was my only overall gripe of the film was that I was hoping for a badass lightsaber duel between man and machine, and we didn't get to see it. So that was my main gripe with it.
It's an incredible level of foreshadowing for where the movie is going, and then also foreshadowing what's happening in the original trilogy. General Grievous, entering the story as this kind of like sort of organic but mostly mechanical being is obviously, where Anakin is headed, who is just like at the end of Revenge of the Sith is just like pieces of human at that point, only
right.
a few, like just basically like the body without the limbs, and which is interesting. And I don't know, I always think it's so funny when Obi-Wan like peeks inside and then Grievous it's like what are you doing? And then he like it's such a funny like I don't know, Lucas's imagination when who comes up with stuff like that? It's just incredible, But yeah, I think Grievous is a great creation. I was introduced to the character through Revenge of the Sith, and then I've since watched Clone Wars and have a broader appreciation of him. But I think he's a cool creation. He's a great character design.
Absolutely, absolutely. No doubt about that. But like I said, I was expecting a lot more out of this character.
One of the things I appreciate about the character, and I'm like James, I was introduced to him through this movie. But one thing I appreciated about him was the humor. Like he's kind of a funny. Yeah. He's a formidable villain in the movie, but he's also a funny character. Just talks and the way he lurches, and I've always found him to be very entertaining. Which is funny because my brother, who's another big Star Wars fan, hates General Grievous. He's such a fun character. But
he's a polarizing character. He really is. I've heard takes that range from he's one of the MVPs to he's a least favorite character, and I see him as just more of as just one component of a broader story. I think he's a great villain design. He's kind of kooky and weird in a cartoony fun way. It fits in with the adventurous aspect of the movie. I don't know. I dig him. He's great. He's fun.
Well, yeah, you're right. I love the design, the great character. It's just, like I said, I was just disappointed that I didn't get to see a badass like I saw in the cartoon.
Sure, yeah.
That's what I was expecting, a badass in the cartoon. That I saw in the cartoon in the live action film, but for whatever reason, Lucas decided just to keep it the way he kept it, which is it still worked, but it could have been more for me.
In a way, you could. I mean, I've never thought about this before, but given what you said, Julio, I think you can make a case for maybe why he took this more humorous approach with it, or the more Flash Gordon serial approach with it.
Right.
The movie has some really dark themes, and it's kind of heavy in a lot of ways. So if you didn't have that Buck Rogers adventure aspect and a lighter humorous side, it wouldn't feel quite like Star Wars.
Yeah, you're right. And I think he was waiting for the end. I think that's why he didn't do it, because he was obviously the ending of the film was the most important part of the movie, right? That fight scene, that final fight scene between Obi-Wan and Anakin Skywalker, where Anakin finally just loses it because he's convinced that he's pretty much convinced of Palpatine's lies. He's convinced that that's the truth, that what Palpatine.
But he's you're right, but he's convinced himself. Mm-hmm. It's like he's believing his own lies, Yeah.
You know, like my relationship with this movie is it's really weird because when I saw the film, it was the first time I walked away from a Star Wars movie disappointed. And I think it was because I had primed myself for disappointment. I was finally of the age of I was ready for Star Wars disillusionment. It was like I walked in ready to hate it. And like I enjoyed that opening sequence just in terms of the level of filmmaking going on. And I really appreciated how big of a step up it was from what we'd seen in the first two films. Like, it really felt like George Lucas was like, this is my only shot now. Like, I only have one more chance to do this. I'm going to do everything I've ever wanted to do, and I'm going to do it well. And that opening sequence is incredible. And even at the time, I was really into it. And then I remember the movie kind of lost me in its like second act. And then by the third act, I remember being like, oh, okay, like I kind of like the way that this whole, like, it's like a puzzle piece, you know, we get 4, 5, 6, and then 1, 2, 3, and 3 clicks into place to bring the whole thing full circle.
Right.
You know, you end on the, you know, the two suns and, you know, with Owen and Beru looking off at the sunset, which, you know, is you know, the famous shot from A New Hope. And so I admired all of that. But as I've gotten older, the moment where Anakin goes back to his home or his apartment or whatever, his beautiful Coruscant apartment, and he's sitting there and he's waiting because he's like, he knows he's doing the right thing at that moment, that like he should let the Jedi go take care of Palpatine and sit this one out. And Palpatine has had his grasp on him, maybe even for 3 films at this point. Like, I really think if you watch this trilogy from the perspective that Palpatine has been aware of Anakin from the get-go, that he is the one that is guiding Anakin in the wrong direction. You know, from the moment he says, you know, I'm going to watch your career with great interest in the Phantom Menace, to all through the way he's manipulating him in Attack of the Clones, and then especially in Revenge of the Sith. At that moment when he speaks to him in that very quiet scene where Anakin is so tortured, and he says, like, I'm the only one that can save your wife. And then he comes back, and it is the moment in all of Star Wars that is it really communicates tragedy in a way that is incredible. And I find it so satisfying. It's like, from that moment until the end, it is the saddest blockbuster I think I've ever seen in my life. It is just a real tragedy, and it's a bummer to watch. But it's just, it's also like just so well done.
Yeah. One of my other main gripes was I was hoping they'd explain why the Jedi couldn't feel Palpatine's dark power. That was my only gripe, was like, why couldn't Yoda, why couldn't Mace Windu or any of the Jedi Council could have felt that there was a presence? I mean, they did kind of, I know Yoda kind of kept saying like, oh, I feel something, but why couldn't they feel it off Palpatine? Which is why I wish they could explain to it. I wish they could have just wrote a line in there somewhere as to how he tricked them all to hide, you know, pretty much under their noses throughout the whole trilogy. Another thing I want to add, was it just me, or did you really like feel like you were kind of hoping Samuel Jackson's would have just been like, Mace Windu, Palpatine, you're under arrest, mother effer? Did you? I was really like, I wish you could just say mother effer once, once in the movie. Yeah. To get away with it.
In fact, he could have said, you know, mother, and then like a ship could have gone by really loud, you know, just drowned it out.
That would have been great. That would have been fantastic.
That might have been a Star Wars moment of all time.
Yeah, it would have been for sure. But that was my other main gripe of the film, was that is why couldn't they have caught the dark side? You know, why couldn't they caught it open? You know.
Sean, do you have a thought on this? Because I got some thoughts too.
Well, I was going to say, you're bringing up that point. That doesn't really bother me. I always just assume like Palpatine or the Sith have a power or a nature that can obscure those kind of things, and they do kind of talk about the obscurity of the dark side. But what I was going to say is, like, this movie has some lines like, when Palpatine says, you have to listen to all viewpoints. You can't just listen to the dogmatic views of the Jedi.
Yeah.
And like, there's a lot of stuff that Palpatine says to seduce him along that, along those lines. That's like, where like even you as the viewer, you're like, oh yeah, interesting. That's a good point. You know, like,
definitely,
it's very reasonable.
Like, in fact, what if he's right? You know, like I think one of the biggest things about the prequels is that it suggests that maybe they're both right and both wrong at the same time. You know,
that's exactly what I'm getting at, because he criticizes, there's criticisms of the Jedi, I think maybe by Anakin, where he's talking about like their pride and their, you know, their, and then Palpatine says they just cling to power. That's what they do, because the Jedi crave power, you know, and you know, or he says in the Sith crave power, he's like, oh, the Jedi don't, you know, like, so Palpatine's always throwing shade on the Jedi, but like to your point, James, it does kind of beg that question of like, well, yeah, there is some criticism here. All this, I think the fact that it all happens under their nose, and that they're, you know, and that they let themselves be led down these paths, and they allow this warfare to wage, you know, and that's how they try to solve it, is by going to war, you know. There's some like really things to think about there. And actually, and in The Last Jedi, are you still there? Oh yeah, Julio, you froze. In The Last Jedi, when Luke, there's this crazy like techno crane like boom shot that zooms into Luke's face in Last Jedi, where he's like talking really fast about how like the Jedi were basically like prideful, and like they were responsible for the fall of the Republic and that kind of stuff. And like, I felt like that was the direction Rian Johnson was taking us, like of kind of doubling down or betting on some of these themes that we've been talking about these last few minutes. You know what I mean? Of saying, and you know, there was rumors about gray Jedi, right? Like there's going to be gray Jedi, and like maybe the balance to the Force is like this idea that we need to stop looking at things so in such a polarized manner. So yeah, there's some really interesting like philosophical stuff there.
It's it's the thing that I think is so interesting about Revenge of the Sith is learning that that, you know, Palpatine had some good ideas. I don't like the way he executed them, but you know, at the same time, you know, a villain that believes that they are right, beyond a shadow of doubt, that they're not into it just to mustache twirl and be villainous, but like they are pursuing a cause that
still there, James?
Enduring.
Oh,
we lost you. But yeah, I agree with what James said.
Before he froze.
Yeah, and like actually, that's really one I think we'll talk about this a few episodes from now. But that's one of them.
I'm back. Did you guys lose me? Or?
Yeah, we lost you there for a second.
Lost you, but like I was saying, like that's one of the mistakes I think. And when we'll talk about the sequel trilogy, we can talk more about this. But
yeah, we'll talk about that in the episode.
That's a mistake that Rise of Skywalker makes, is they turn Palpatine into a caricature and a mustache twirler, and that's never really who he was. You know.
Oh, James, still there?
Yeah, I'm having some internet issues, but I'm cutting in and out. So, but yeah, no, I completely agree about the choice in Rise of Skywalker, and obviously we'll get there. But yeah, Revenge of the Sith is just an interesting film in that sense. Like I think that obviously it's the culmination of all of the machinations, as you were saying, of an entire trilogy of like going from senator to supreme chancellor to then getting emergency powers from our friend Jar Jar Binks.
That whole arc,
single-handedly
was fantastic.
And so this is the thing that I wanted to say about this trilogy as a whole, from my perspective, is that like I like this trilogy a lot, and I really appreciate the filmmaking, and I appreciate what Lucas was doing. When I watch the movies now, I watch them solely from the perspective of Palpatine, and they are much more interesting films from that perspective. Anakin is the protagonist, but they are Palpatine's movies. He won the trilogy, and if looked at from that perspective, And if you look at everything that happens as being part of his broader design, it's so much more interesting in that sense.
I'll piggyback on that and say this prequel trilogy, George has some ideas and some real ideas that he wanted to get across, and some themes that he wanted to get across.
Yeah,
like the corruption of power, and we talked about Anakin lying to himself and telling himself untruths. And obviously, like, that was like the time of the Bush administration, and George had a lot of criticisms, I think, with the Bush administration, and a lot of the things that were on his mind at that time were about political power and how, it can be abused, and how, those lines about, like, this is how democracy ends, with loud applause, like, even though a line like that's kind of cheesy, like, it speaks to the fact that George had ideas that he was trying to get across with these films. And that was when we talk about the sequel trilogy, that's something that I don't care for about the first and last of the sequel trilogy, which is, okay, the idea behind these films is Star Wars is cool. Okay. What else you got? We know that already. Like, what are you trying to say? And, like, in a movie like Last Jedi has something to say. You know what I mean?
Definitely, it challenges it. It challenges that status quo.
Yeah, we'll talk
as
about
opposed to just celebrating the iconography. But
we'll talk more at length about the new sequels when we get there, because I know we have a lot to say about them. I know I do.
Yes.
But you're right. You're absolutely right. Both you and James and Sean, George Lucas did have something to say, and I like the fact that he sprinkled it in there, and kind of, it forced viewers to ask the questions, like, well, that is a good point. Like, the Palpatine does, that's true. You should, study everything or look into everything to see just what exactly is out there. And I did like the themes of, you're right, the corruption of power, how the Jedi was kind of, how they become almost like stale in a way.
They were
definitely.
They were comfortable, exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that, now that you mentioned that, that's probably why they couldn't sense Palpatine, because they got comfortable, they got cocky, they got overconfident. We got this. We're peacekeepers. We know when danger is coming. And in reality, they weren't.
We've been doing it 1,000 years.
Yeah, exactly.
That's also what when Qui-Gon Jinn, who I think the more you delve into the prequels, Qui-Gon is a very interesting character, because he's an outsider. He's not on the council. And the minute he comes in and says, "I think I got attacked by a Sith Lord," the council's like, "Get a load of this guy! Come on, for 1,000 years, get out of here, Qui-Gon! You're a fucking crazy guy! Come on!" And it's really very interesting that, like, he's very, like, steadfast in his belief that, like, the Jedi really should open their minds up, and he's very interested in this idea of bringing balance to the Force. This is a running theme in this trilogy by itself, is bringing the Force into balance. And I appreciated it with my more recent rewatches of the prequels, that at the end of the movie, at the end of the trilogy, the Force is in balance. It is a master and an apprentice on one side, and another master and an apprentice on another, basically. Like, it's been, whittled down to 2 and 2. And it, maybe in a sense, the prophecy of the chosen one was actually like a Sith trying to trick the Jedi into believing that there was going to be a chosen one to make the Jedi better, but instead was going to cut them down to their level. I don't know. That's my theory.
No, that's a great viewpoint, because it does truly bring balance to the Force.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it whittles everything down and forces them to, like, come back stronger.
Very interesting take. Yeah, that's great. I like that.
It forces them to come back stronger.
It sure does.
Well said, Sean. Well said.
Thank you.
So I guess that wraps it up, guys. We've covered all 3 films. And what do you guys think? Do you guys think that the prequels belong in the Criterion Collection?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I would love to see their cover art. I'm sure it'd be amazing.
Yeah, it'd be amazing for sure. Minimalist, cover art for the Criterion Collection. Overall, I would say the trilogy was entertaining. It really was. Upon watching them again with older eyes, being almost 40 years old, I don't want to give away my age yet, but close to 40 years old, I have to say they were very entertaining, and they had flashes of genius. They truly did, but it fell flat on a lot of parts that it hurt the movie. It hurt the films overall, all of them, all three of them. But the ideas that George Lucas presented were interesting, and but again, it's just George Lucas is not a well-rounded writer. I think he should have kept his producer approach. I'm going to write the story. I'm going to hire a screenwriter to write the screenwrite the story I've written, and I'm going to kind of step back and let the director that I hand choose to produce what I want in my head here. And I think that's what he should have done. But once again, I think he wanted to prove himself that he was a good director, and I think he could have been, but he was just so far off the game. It's almost like someone who was a great guitar player, and then he just stopped playing guitar for like 10, 15 years, and he picks it back up, and it's not going to be as easy as it was when he was younger, right?
And then decides to write a rock opera, just like
yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I think and personally speaking, this is my own personal opinion, I think he should have done a small film first before he jumped into the prequels, so he could shake off that rust and remember what it was like to make a film. And but again, he was like Sean mentioned earlier, he was the emperor, right? Who's going to tell the emperor he has no clothes? So he surrounded himself with the yes men. With his, Lucasfilm was at the peak at that time because of the re-release. I think the re-release was what got him to be like, you know what? There's still a market here. There's still something we could do here, and I think that's what led to that. But yeah, I would say so. To wrap it up, any last words before we say goodbye for the night?
I don't have any last words, but I have a friend here who does. Are you ready? Okay.
You okay, R2? Good.
What else?
Thanks, Wedge. Let's close it up. We're going in full throttle. That'll keep those fighters off our back.
Disney, you better not shut me down because of that, bastards.
Hey, spoiler alert for next week, okay? Come on.
Yeah, man.
I don't even know who that character is yet.
That's the teaser.
Okay.
Teaser for next week.
Fair enough.
So, James, any last words before we end it?
Yeah, just one quick thought based on what you said. I spent so much of my life wishing that these movies were something else, and now as I've gotten older, I've started to appreciate them for what they are. And even though there are so many decisions I wish that Lucas had made, I'm so glad that these movies exist exactly the way he intended. Like, warts and all, flaws and all. Like, there's not anything else like it. You have to look to someone like Cameron or Nolan, who's been given that kind of scale to just say, go make whatever you want, and really produce a vision that is just like, wow, it's all up there on the screen. And it's incredible. For that. And they'll always be fascinating to me for that reason.
Fantastic.
It reminds me of the Rolling Stones song. You can't always get what you want, but if you sometimes you just might find you get what you need.
Yeah.
It turns out absolutely all along. I think they helped us grow up because they made us realize that like life is disappointing, and movies are disappointing, and fandom is disappointing, and and those movies being disappointing helped me realize that not everything is going to be as great as it was when I was a kid. So
I wholeheartedly agree. And when we get to the sequel trilogy conversation, I have some things to share about the Star Wars grieving process, the final death blow, and then the grieving process that I experienced.
Yes, definitely.
All right.
So, but the prequel trilogy and processing those was a big lead up to that.
Yes.
That's great. Well said. So next week, guys, we're doing the classic trilogy, which is going to be nothing but praise. I don't think I have anything bad to say about. Well, there are some things that bad about maybe Return of the Jedi, but overall, I think we're going to have a good time next week. So next week will be the original trilogy. We're probably gonna cut back on the clips, considering that Disney is being a-holes and not letting me showcase. Hey Ferris, how you doing, bud? You came right at the end of the show, dude. You should have came earlier. We were talking about Star Wars, the prequels, and how much we love them, so you could catch the replay. So yeah, we're gonna cut back on the clips because, you know, like I said, Disney are being a-holes. And so yeah, next week, come by next week, guys, where we talk about the classic trilogy, New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi, and we'll be discussing the highs and lows of those three films and how much influence they've had over the years, not only in the film industry or cinema in general, but in pop culture as well, because they've had a major influence in pop culture. So with that said, any last words overall, guys, that you want to say before we take off?
I want to say this has been really fun, and it's been like doing Star Wars therapy with two of my friends. Seriously, it's great, guys.
I feel the same way.
Ferris says hi to Sean and James.
Hey Ferris, what's up?
James, what were you saying? Sorry, I interrupted you there.
Oh no, I agree. I mean, these movies, you know, I've loved them, I've hated them, I've liked them, I've disliked them. I've gone through so many different emotions about them, and I've just come to the realization that, you know, I feel like I can't even really be objective about. I can't really be objective about them anymore. Like, I can only be subjective. They are ingrained in my DNA, whether I want them or not. They're like family members and friends that you just are like, oh, I wish they would go away, but, you know, I don't know, they're family. Like, right. You gotta love them, you know.
And you start to miss them, and you're like, I gotta go visit them soon.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, absolutely.
Also,
that's what I felt when I watched the prequels. I was like, hey, all right, this isn't that bad like I remember. It was actually pretty entertaining.
Yeah.
All right. Well, then, in that case, say good nights. Have everyone have a good weekend. Stay safe out there. And join us next week for when we cover the original trilogy. So, yeah. Good night, guys, and happy Friday.
Happy Friday.
May the Force be with you.